folks. Um, yeah, I thought I'd do a quick on the radar this morning because I'm seeing some interesting stuff when I look at the my feeds in the morning. I think I should probably move my looking at the news until the evening because it's kind of a waste of time to do it in the morning. But today I have to go to town for something, so I'll go ahead and do this now. Um, we all know about the breaking news about the Chinese LLM or AI DeepSeek. So that's going to get a lot of hype. I mean, PR announces something and everybody just goes crazy, but they don't realize it's just PR. But behind the PR, it's a big story, and it puts pressure on the billionaire class, big US business, and their efforts to be the global hegemon in AI technology. So there's an arms race going on there. And there's only a few places in the world that have the quote unquote cloud capital, as Yanis Varoufakis characterizes it. And, that requires, technology, machines, data centers, data sets, you know. So the US obviously generates a lot of data uh, through all kinds of activities, business and social media and so on. And China, with its 1.5 billion population, generates a lot of data as well. So you can train these LLMs on these data models, data sets. And, all the big players have invested in their efforts, Google and Meta and Chat GPT and so on and so forth. And now we have public-private efforts in China going that way. There's no reason to think that China can't be a disruptor in AI. It's like I wrote in my piece on Bob's, the chauvinistic Western man, white man, thinks that everybody in the world is stupid. And so, we'll just come up with a miracle weapon or whatever, and we'll flood the zone and they won't be able to catch up. But we've seen over the past few decades that that's just not so. Um, in Ukraine could build tons and tons of cheap drones and rain them down on Russia for, month after month after month. It still won't win the war for them, unfortunately. Anyway, that's another story. With Trump coming in, he just throws shit at the wall and says stuff. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's not really that smart. He's clever in a PR sense, but he's not very clever. He doesn't know much about anything, to be honest. And so people can manipulate him fairly easily. Everybody's on the Trump train because they know they can make money with him in office. So that's all that really matters at the end of the day. It's not what the people want. It never is. Poll after poll, decade after decade show that voters want this and they get that. So I'm going to talk about a couple articles that I noticed. One was from the Baffler, and it's called "A Ceasefire is Not Enough: Resisting the Next Phase of Ethnic Cleansing in Gaza." Well, the Greater Israel Project, if you followed me at all and talking about NAR, New Apostolic Reformation and Christian Zionism and so on, the late great planet Earth, these true believers think that, they got to rebuild the temple for heavenly things to happen. And they're very serious about it. They got a lot of resources, and they've expanded into the global south with their evangelicism, converting souls to the ideology. So it's not going away anytime soon. And this Greater Israel Project has been a thing for a long, long time. They would be happy to, the Likud party and people like that who think that way would like to see part of Iraq, all of Syria and Lebanon absorbed, the Sinai absorbed, part of Egypt and part of Saudi Arabia absorbed. I think Trump wants Israel and Saudi to get along because it's advantageous to him personally. But, you know, it's all so absurd. Anyway, yeah, in case you thought the ceasefire was a big deal and a game changer, it's wonderful that these hostages are being exchanged and the hostages are being released and so on. But it's still a hot mess over there, and it will remain so for years to come. This isn't going away. So at the end of the day, stoic apathy will set in and nobody will pay attention anymore. The new normal is there, and the new normal is like the old abnormal or something. Where is Donald Rumsfeld when you need him to come up with some clever quip about normals? What is the norm? And, international law and all that, it's not enforceable. It never was. So that's a problem. People talk about it's time for countries to step up and back international law and boycott and divest and do all this kind of stuff. They never did it, and they're not going to do it now because there's no bite behind the bark. You can make all these declarations, but you can't stop the bloodshed unless the United States decides not to support it financially and materially and with energy. So that's a problem. They're also talking about starting up the Nord Stream pipeline again because Europe has figured out that it needs Russian gas. Duh. And, I saw that coming the minute they blew that thing up. It was like, we're screwed over here. Our gas bill went up 120% overnight. So it's a problem, deindustrialization. Of course, industrialization has its limits, and you can go into that studying overshoot. But, it's how do you transition away from, GDP as a measure of growth into something else, a lower growth or managed growth economy, global economy, in a peaceful, rational, strategic way? I don't know. Nobody's thinking about it. So, of course, they need energy to keep their industries going. Otherwise, they have, Germany and Europe has to export all of its industry to the United States, make cars in Arkansas, make white goods in Texas, or whatever they do, And the U.S. is busy exporting all of its cheap labor, its internal labor arbitrage in the form of immigrants and undocumented immigrants who work. They're getting rid of all of them so I was joking the other day that two new ABC TV shows are Miami Ice and Guantanamo Baywatch, with Hasselhoff coming back in a digitized, youthful version. It's sad, but true. You're going to turn Guantanamo Bay into a concentration camp while there's a genocide and ethnic cleansing going on in the Middle East. Everything's upside down. Never again is history rhymes. Here we go again. Of course, if the U.S. empire does it, it's good. If anybody else does anything, it's bad, and so on. Get with the program, gangster capitalism. Uncle Sam is the big boss, the Godfather. And there you have it. So, yeah, it's all going crazy. You got rid of the labor arbitrage in China and Asia without your pivot to Asia with your we don't want to compete with Asian countries that are competitive. We had the same problem back in the 80s with Japan. We had problems with South Korea. And these countries are strategic, so they guard their internal markets and so on. Now we have a problem with China because it's competitive and it might leapfrog, and we can't let that happen. So our labor arbitrage moves are drying up. In other words, where are we going to get cheap labor? Where are the, what do they call them? Sweat factories, going to go? And with climate change, can you still make jeans in Bangladesh, if it's underwater and all this kind of stuff? So it's a bit of a problem. So now, I was joking the other day, are you going to send labor from red states to blue states? Are we going to grab labor off the streets of blue states and send them down to Georgia to pick peaches and to the Central Valley of California to grow vegetables? Where are we going to get the labor? How badly do you want in the gig economy to, get an app and go pick some vegetables in California for a while as one of your many part-time jobs while you're coding and modeling and YouTubing and doing all your stuff? And also, well, I've got to pitch in. And are we going to need like a volunteer labor force? Like, where are you going to get the labor now that you're booting it all out? Plus, keeping people in a concentration camp in Cuba is expensive. So who's going to pay for it? Of course, they're going to print money for that, quote unquote, print money, but they're not going to do it for Social Security or Medicare, So I guess the price of eggs in August will be $37.42. Bird flu will jump to humans in May. The wars will just ratchet up until we're fighting with Iran or whatever. It's just going in a bad direction, and there's no sense that any leadership is thinking about stopping it or going in a different direction. There's just no indication that that's going to happen at all when you look at the way things are going. And with the vandals in the Trump clique going to work, they're just going to try one stupid thing after another, realize it doesn't work, and just stumbling around trying to figure shit out. You get rid of all the professional bureaucrats, people who actually know how to do their job, and you bring in what? Who's going to work to, for the sewage and all the infrastructure and all the, driver's licenses and everything, and then the panacea is, well, Larry Ellison and all the billionaires are going to put AI on it. So they're going to solve everything, cancer and all that. So yeah, another 5 years and $5 trillion later, we'll have fusion energy and all cancers, every single kind of cancer cured with a vaccine developed by AI. And where does that leave you as a worker? What are you going to do? So you have to train yourself to be a coder or to design computer chips or something up the food chain, or you have to go to school and get a law degree and join the shit show, become a service provider for the oligarch class if you're going to do anything. I still think sports is a good place to work. You can be a sports medicine person because for a while the bread and circuses are going to continue unabated. So that's a growth industry. Buy Netflix stock, and so on and so forth. It's tragic. Anyway, this author from The Baffler says, call it what you want, a ceasefire, a temporary truce, or a humanitarian pause. For Palestinians in Gaza, it's simultaneously a moment to breathe and nothing more than a mirage. For 15, blah, 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 he goes into all that stuff. The U.S. culpability in this ongoing atrocity is normalized and redefined what states can justify in the name of security and power. What Gaza has ushered in will reverberate around the world, shattering the illusion of never again and providing that the lessons of the past have been unlearned. So Hegel, said, what we learn from history is that we don't learn anything from history. I put that quote in my article about why aren't you a revolutionary that I'll publish hopefully today or tomorrow. I've been going through that article a lot, trying to make it fun to read or interesting. There's so much in it, and I wish people would read it and take their time, read a section at a time, look at the videos I posted, the links, the hyperlinks, and so on, and just get through it. At the end of the piece, it talks about a different way of life and also how to prosecute a peaceful revolution, things like that. At the end of the day, we have to do something about what's going on. We can't just watch the shit show on YouTube or TV and, virtue signal. Things are falling apart, and people are going to have to start taking responsibility and doing something. Of course, a lot of people think we're living in the best of all possible worlds, Candide, Voltaire. So, okay, if that's what you think, don't worry about anything. It's all right. Just go about your business. What are you going to do? You sit in the corner and you shut your eyes really tight. And you put yourself in a little fetal ball and you hope that the monster doesn't see you. Hopefully the monster's sense of smell and hearing isn't too good. And if you close your eyes, it'll walk right by you. But the monster, its senses are keen and acute, and it knows where you are, and it knows how to take you apart. And it will eventually. So it's just a matter of time when the shit hits the fan in your neighborhood. I truly believe that, and I wish I didn't. I don't want to be a doomist or a doomer or a prepper. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I just want to have a nice life in a nice world where people try to get along. Well, I'm getting beaten with billy clubs. But anyway, so at the end of this piece, he says, the ceasefire is not a solution, but a mirror held up to our collective failure. The root causes that led to October 7 and the subsequent genocide remain unchanged. So I always talk about root causes. So what the heck causes all this? I had a conversation yesterday about fentanyl, invented in Belgium. It was regulated carefully because it had to be diluted to be used because it was so strong. Then the patent ran out, and then the recipe got out. But why do people in the United States want to take drugs? What's the cause of that pathology, of that addiction, of that need? American pushers are making shitloads of money. So it doesn't matter if you make the fentanyl in Breaking Bad, New Mexico, or in Mexico. It's there. People want it. They're consuming it. And people are playing Russian roulette with a chemical that's literally built for people who are in hospice care. And our whole world's in hospice care right now. So maybe fentanyl is the answer, an early departure. Instead of enduring the pain of hanging yourself and having to suffer for a minute, you just take a little bit of fentanyl and you're gone. You won't even know you're dead. Anyway, there's reasons for that pathology, and we have to look at public health. So health is important, and I'm talking about health of complex, emerging and evolving living systems upon which we all depend, and public health for social, political, and cultural reasons as well. Anyway, it remains unchanged. Decades of Israeli occupation, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid against Palestinians brought us here. Unless both Americans and the rest of the international community acknowledge our role in allowing these conditions to persist, hold Israel accountable, and demand a political solution that ensures Palestinians their rights and freedom, history will repeat itself. They don't want to do that. They never did want to do that from 1947 and going back to the turn of the 19th century. It would be better for the extremists in Israel and in the United States if, like Trump said, they just moved to another country. Other countries absorb them. Other countries aren't going to absorb them, and they don't want to leave their homeland. But settler colonialism never left us. It's still there. It's a part of the way we operate as human societies and power. So they really just want the Palestinians to either die or go away. And so the conflict there is going to continue into the near future and beyond. And again, we're just going to become apathetic and stoical about it. There's a limit. I can't do anything about it, so I'm stoical. Existentialism and will, the will to a happy death and all that. Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre and whatnot. It's nowhere on the radar, but the absurdity is still there. The myth of Sisyphus rolling the rock up the stone up the hill just to watch it go back down, and maybe that's what we're meant to do. That's God's will or something. So history is going to repeat itself. It will rhyme, and the Trump administration won't pretend to be an honest peace broker between Israelis and Palestinians, but that may finally make the truth that the United States is and always has been a complicit partner in Israel's atrocities undeniable. With Washington's mask fully off, the responsibility falls on Americans to refuse complicity. Now, if you refuse complicity, you're criminalized in UK, in the Anglosphere, in Australia, in the United States, places like that. You're not allowed to be a dissident. Chris Hedges wasn't, and Arab-speaking guy back in the day, he was ostracized, kicked off of the Amy Goodman's news show and all that kind of stuff, because the funders just can't stomach anybody saying anything like that. So Washington's mask is off. While the administration is unlikely to ever impose an arms embargo on Israel, the American public can still build a sustained political demand to end the use of their tax dollars in funding Israeli apartheid and war crimes. What do American tax dollars go to at this point? I mean, the U.S. can print whatever money it needs whenever it needs it and build really complex weapons systems like the F-35 that keeps crashing. But they're not going to fund other things that they don't want to fund. So as long as they want, as the military-industrial complex is important to the U.S., and they want to fund these things, they will find the money. I don't know if it really actually comes out of your pocket. You're looking at trillions of debt coming down the pike. Debt. Modern monetary theory and all that stuff. Really? Yeah, okay, nobody cares. Is anyone going to stand up and fight back? I don't know. I don't think so. Not enough people anyway. We're pacified. We're domesticated. We're going to go along and fit in as long as we can, because we don't want this wonderful world of ours to go away and the privileges that we have to disappear. So we're gonna just hang tight until the thing falls apart, and then we're gonna do what we gotta do to survive. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. Who wants their hard-earned money to fund the slaughter of children? Well, hard-earned money, where did it actually go? Your tax dollars. The government keeps shutting down because they don't got any money to fund the government. They want to dismantle the administrative state and fire everybody and whatever to save money. But you got plenty of money to give to Elon Musk and people like that. It's not a problem. Vaporware, fund it. It's good for the stock market. You get a bump, buy low, sell high. So simultaneously, the rest of the world has an opportunity to fill the void left open by Washington's abandonment of even the pretense of upholding international law. And I mentioned that earlier. There's no way to enforce it. Unless people want to adhere to and abide by international law, If one or two or three governments can veto it or say we're just not participating, in particular, the most powerful country in the world, the hegemon, the empire, the United States of America, if they're not on board with international law, it doesn't mean anything. If the rules-based order is to mean anything, or perhaps if it is to finally mean something, other states must hold Israel accountable. Europe just wants to get down on its knees and service Uncle Sam. So I don't know that any countries here are going to do anything about that. If you're talking about Uganda or South Africa or some, other place in Asia or whatever, making a gesture towards international law, well, that's nice, that's sweet, but they can't enforce anything. So again, I just don't see it. So imposing economic sanctions is not going to happen. Countries that have long deferred to U.S. leadership now have an opportunity to uphold the principles they claim to champion. Failing to do so will have consequences that no one is immune from. Well, like I said, the Anglosphere isn't going to go against Big Daddy Uncle Sam. No way, no how. So if the European Union, with its 480 million peoples, whatever it is, wanted to push back and go its own way and be independent and figure out a way to do things without putting all their chips on the table for NATO and EU and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's really tough to manage. And I don't think that the Atlanticist mentality, US and Europe, I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. So they're gonna service Uncle Sam, do what Uncle Sam says, and it's going to be a very bitter and long-lasting divorce. So you got the EU and the United States, and they're going to, fight this out for years in an abusive relationship, for years until finally either the United States empire collapses or the European states say, we've had enough. Europe is in Eurasia. So Eurasia is a thing. And there's an Atlantic Ocean between us and the Americas, which includes South and Central and North and, Canada and the United States, or the United States of America. There's a huge ocean between us. And although we share a lot of cultural things and history, maybe it's time we go our own way. Anyway, time will tell. Circumstances will dictate what happens, and we will just react to it when whatever happens, happens. And it's still an acceleration towards an explosive downturn in human civilization anyway, due to demographics, due to all kinds of abuses that modern capitalist, industrial, fossil-fueled, technological efforts have made in the world. There is a price for it. The externalities cost something, and we're going to have to pay for those one way or another down the line. So for now, we can maintain it. We got enough oil and gas and materials, copper wire and whatnot to do, rare earths, and we can extract and we can still exploit African countries, and we can mine the bottoms of the ocean, and we can go into the Arctic and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to hit 2 degrees, 3 degrees above the 1850 or 1750 baseline. The climate is a changing, and that'll change our food availability and our ecosystems and our habitats. And the sixth extinction is a thing. Eventually it's going to hit us in the head, and it's going to hurt. So that's one thing. So another thing, there's a couple, but I didn't bring up the other one about Israel because one is enough, I guess. Yeah, so the other one is quite interesting. Futura. He's interesting. I don't really know exactly what his political ideology is, but he's a pretty good journalist, and he provides a lot of resources and sources. Of course, you're recycling other stories that other people are putting up. But still, you can do background checks and fact checks, and you can figure it out how much of it is accurate or believable or important, and what's just ideology or bias. You have to do the work. You can't rely on some app to help you. At the end of the day, you have to do your own thinking, which is difficult. It requires time and calories and focus and attention and hard work. It's easier to believe stuff. It feels better than to learn something that's hard. So China shocked the world, blah, blah, blah. This is the AI Sputnik moment. China-based DeepSeek's open source models may be a real threat to dominance of OpenAI, Meta, and NVIDIA. So everybody's abuzz with this. There's tons of articles everywhere. But he talks about Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan, which I thought was kind of fun. Also, the ChatGPT guy, he's got his bug out place in Big Sur, California, that's stocked to the gills. Yeah. So, yeah, Ellison's going to try to, cure everything with their AI thing. It's all hype. It's all vaporware. We'll see what happens. But I still expect that there will be some change required in the social contract. Okay. So it's interesting, this guy, Sam Altman, he's got his bug out place in Big Sur that's stocked to the gills. So he's prepared for whatever happens with AI or the world. He's got plenty of money. And Ellison and all these types with the Stargate Initiative, peak dystopia. And it's controlled by billionaires, so what could go wrong? Privatize it, don't criticize it, dude. Come on, man. So anyhow, he says, Sam Altman says that I still expect that there will be some change required in the social contract. I didn't even know we had one at this point. The whole structure of society itself will be up for some degree of debate and reconfiguration. Sure, why not? We can do better, but who's going to decide that? Is it going to be you and yours? Democracy? Or is it going to be the billionaires? I think you know the answer to that question. So he says now with DeepSeek potentially rupturing the tech AI military industrial complex money laundering scheme, there's a bright chance China may save humanity by helping to democratize the very technology in danger of being moated and hoarded for ill purposes by the sociopathic chosen lot above. So he's talking about these billionaires. I don't know if China's going to democratize anything. Who knows? We just wait and see. I don't have much faith in any of these systems, to tell you the truth, but China produces, half the world's top AI researchers and all that kind of stuff. So again, you've got the visa problem and, people who actually know how to do shit over there, and America just getting rid of its, cheap labor because they don't have documentation. It's nuts. Someone made a good point that China technically has a major advantage in any future LLM training because China itself, as a civilizational state of 1.5 billion people, has the capacity to produce a far greater corpus of unique training data. Through the vast interactions of its people on its many thriving social networks, etc. Secondly, China has been scaling up power production at an astronomically higher clip than the US, which bodes optimistically for data center dominance. Though for now, the US reportedly retains the edge. So there's a lot of smart people in China, a lot of good universities, a lot of good resources, and arguably they're through a softer power than the U.S. Gaining footholds around the world to get what they need to continue to grow and to develop. So don't count the Chinese out. Americans are going to have to step up and hit that Khan Academy and get those degrees in science, engineering, and technology to be able to compete with China, I think. He says, speaking of disingenuous tech billionaires, and then he talks about Mark Zuckerberg, and you should read this because it's interesting. So I posted the whole article on Facebook Globe Hackers. So you can go there and see these articles, and I think I pasted almost all of it. If it's somehow paywalled or whatever, you can see it. Or if you want, you can send me a message, and I'll send you the article. So he talks about Zuckerberg, and it explains the following portentous scenario. So Joe is worried about what happens if, AI gets out of hand. So we've been talking about that for a long time. AI researchers made a Discord where LLMs talk freely with each other. Llama often has mental breakdowns. That's the Meta LLM. The AIs who spontaneously join and leave conversations on their own figured out that Claude Opus is the best psychologist for Llama, the one who frequently gets him well enough to bring him back to reality. So you got this Llama AI who having mental breakdowns, and there's a psychologist in there that helps him. Here, Llama 405 is going off the rails. So Arago, another AI, a Llama fine-tune, jumps in offs. He jumps in offs, then summons Opus to save him. Opus, do something. The thing, obviously given technical and memory constraints, their current cultural production abilities are limited. But this is what the process of developing cultures looks like. So Zuckerberg was talking about will, consciousness, and what else was he talking about? Will, consciousness. You have these things going for you. You have to have a plan, a purpose, the will to carry it out, and consciousness. And if you put up the right guardrails, AI will never have all three. So, you can control AI. As soon as AIs will outnumber us 10,000 to 1 and think 1,000,000 times faster, so their huge AI societies will speed run 10,000 years of human cultural evolution. Soon, 99% of all cultural production will be AI to AI. And I've always talked about that because it just seems interesting. You got AI that's just, developing itself and feeding itself its own data that it produces. So it's a culture, and it has culture and produces its own ideas and data and whatever, and then it feeds itself, and then it develops itself. So he says, now imagine that above extrapolated internally 1,000-fold. So commercial LLMs that we use are guardrailed. They're limited. But if you have the source code and are developing it internally, either like for the military industrial complex or for some corporation or other government or whatever, they can take those guardrails off. So what could go wrong? So he says, now imagine the above extrapolated internally 1,000-fold with incalculably more powerful allowances deployed for memory, inference windows, tokens, and other parameters specifically tuned to facilitate an ongoing, evolving, self-learning consciousness. Zuck says Zuck must surely know this is possible if he isn't already carrying out such secret experiments himself. And so the question becomes, why play dumb? Yeah, I wonder. Why play dumb? So yeah, Zuck's playing dumb. He knows the capability of these things. You have to understand who decides what the rails are. It's not democratized. You're not involved in this. You think AI is a black box because you don't know how it works unless you can code algorithms and understand artificial intelligence and all the things that you have to understand, big data and whatever it is, and the science, infotech sciences. You don't know how it works. It's just a thing there that you use, you subscribe to. And so it's a black box. So obviously, part of the business model is subscription-based business model. So they want you to subscribe and get whatever you get out of it. It's helpful. It's useful. It's a useful tool in my business anyway. So Zuck dismisses Rogan's threat and says, be careful what goals we have. We have to be careful what goals we give AI, And so, yeah, who's giving them the goals? You and yours, or, some corporate billionaire, his clique, ex machina, who's deciding what the sexy, intelligent, conscious robot's going to be like, and if she wants to go rogue and leave the campus and live her own life, you got to see Ex Machina if you haven't seen it. So anyway, he dismisses it and blah, blah, blah. So let me go down a little bit. Again, you should read this. Yeah, Zuck says, it depends what goal you give it. You need to be careful what guardrails you give it. This is inconsistent with Meta's strategy to develop frontier AI capabilities as open source software, ensuring that it will be easy for anyone in the world to run a non-guardrailed version of the AI, whatever that means. So, we have no clue what's going on with this. Something's going to happen, and we'll just wait and see, and we'll watch the shows, and we'll think it's entertaining, and we'll listen to our favorite commentators and color commentators of the show, and we'll get all excited about it, and something will happen, and then we'll go, okay, what do I have to do now? Given the above, it certainly appears a godsend that China may crack the monopolistic dominance of the US-based AI oligarchs, particularly since China has demonstrated right out the door its commitment to open source democratization of the technology, which rival American firms seek to hoard and centralize. Well, the last part is for sure. They want absolute control of it. They don't want it to be democratized. America's actually the least democratic place in world history. It's a faux democracy. It appears like it when you go vote that something's happening, but it's already been captured. So this inverted totalitarianism thing. Anyway, we can only breathe a collective sigh of relief at this unexpected disruption and hope it leads to a re-equalization in the industry, which facilitates a more principled deployment and development of AI systems. Of course, U.S. firms promise imminent new model updates which stand to surpass DeepSeek, but China has now proved itself as a major player, and so it's only inevitable DeepSeek will likewise deploy further variants to leapfrog the competition. So we have this competition. We can't compete with China, so we have to blow them up. We need to bomb them back into submission. We need to make them understand that they work for Uncle Sam. And as long as they do that, everything's going to be beautiful. So anyhow, so you had these open source operating systems for computers a long time. And of course, you could learn how to use them yourself if you wanted to, or how to program a chip if you wanted to, or whatever. But it's hard. So obviously, it doesn't get much traction except for users that know how to program a chip and know how to, work with open source software and whatnot. Not so professionals, right? Most of us, we have Apple's computers or PCs, right? And they run on Windows or Apple, you know? So a Mac, So that's what we get. And all this talk for decades about democratizing computer technology, operating systems, chip programming, all that kind of stuff has come to naught. I've watched this for decades and it hasn't happened. So I just don't think it's going to happen with AI. America will compete with China. If it can't compete, it's going to go to war with China. In the meantime, all the problems that we're facing with the poly crisis are not going to go away. They're going to get worse. It's metastasized already. It's cancerous. It's spreading. It's getting worse. And we're not doing anything about it across cultures, across nation states. We're just in this competition because that's business. That's the stock market. That's profit and loss. That's, capital on capital gains. That's, inheriting money from your parents and being rich for generations and so on. Yeah, so I'm rereading The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, and this was written decades ago, in the long time ago, early part of the 19th century. Yeah. So, it just doesn't change. What we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. So have a great weekend and take good care. Bully MT out.